Okay, can you hear me? Hello, it's very nice to see you all, to be with you. I can't see you actually. And I have to apologize because I've almost lost my voice. So I'm not quite sure. I'll see how we go, okay? What I need to do now is share my slides with you. This worked okay before. Raphael, can you see the slides? Some things happened because I can't see the slides. Okay, I hope you can see the slides now. And what I wanted to talk about is teaching English today and think about how we used to teach it and how maybe we're going to teach it in the future. And I wanted very much to focus not just on language, but on the people involved and where we are, the place where we're teaching or learning. And obviously the place where we're teaching may be online, it may be face-to-face. In the past, it probably was mostly face-to-face, or maybe it's both. And when you're talking about teaching English, when people are talking about teaching a language, very often the natural thing to do is to focus on the language. But what I want to do, and what I've been thinking about more and more recently, is that we should be focusing first of all on the people involved and ask ourselves perhaps a question: who are we? Are we learners? Are we trainees? Are we wanting to be teachers? Are we teachers now? Or are we trainers of other teachers? Because who we are as people professionally will affect what we actually do with the people we're dealing with. So this is my thoughts within SBS on the 21st of July 2021. And the question is, what is our focus? Past, present, and future. We all have a past, we're in the present, and hopefully we all have a future. So one of the things I think we have to remember is that when we're teaching or learning, we're making personal decisions. There isn't one way of doing something. The course book might tell you, suggest you do something in one way, but actually it's up to you to decide how you want to do it in relation to the context, the place you're in, and your objectives, and just as important, your learners' objectives. So here's it sounds a rather rude question. Professionally, what are you? Think about it for a moment. And please, because I can't interact with you properly, if you've got any questions or comments to put in the chat box, in the comment box, please do, and I can look at them afterwards and then get in touch with you. So do comment away, chat away. So what are you? You're a teacher But who are you? You're a person. It's very funny when people ask me, what are you, Susan? Or what do you do? I can answer in lots of different ways, and I'm sure that's true for all of us. Some of them are revealing, some of them are quite private. Okay, we've thought about people, we've thought about ourselves, or think about the date. Here we are on the 21st of July, 2021. What about the past? What about 21st of July, 2020? And what about the future, 21st of July, 2022? What is the thing that makes those dates important? It seems to me that the 21st of July 2020, and it depends where you are, but thinking of myself, I should have said, some of you know, I'm based in Scotland. I come to Brazil. I've been coming to Brazil very often over the years. But on the 21st of July 2020, I was here. I should have been in Brazil. I should have been coming to Brastisol and to do some things with SBS. But I couldn't because something had happened in between. And where I'll be on the 21st of July 2022, well, I hope I might even be in Brazil, but who knows? But think about yourselves. In terms of those 3 dates, what's the same, what's different, and what is it that makes the difference? And the sort of thing that makes the difference, the sort of thing that, in a sense, 2 years ago, I certainly never thought about, are things like this. Things that have come out of COVID. These are some photographs I've taken over the past year, mostly in the small town where I live. So they're not wonderful photographs, but they are reality. They're authentic. Now, before this time last year, I would never have seen that sign in the place I live. And there are similar signs in pretty well everywhere else in Britain. And I'm sure that you have the same ones in Brazil, probably in Portuguese, but if they're designed for visitors, foreigners, they might well be in other languages. Here's another one, social distancing. Now, this is a phrase that I had never heard 15 months ago. It existed, you can work out what it means, but now all of us know precisely what it means. And shops, stores have done something in the last 15 months which they never did in the past. In the past, you would have notices in the co-op here with opening hours or closing hours, not very much more. But now we have a one-way system in place. Please stay safe, follow the arrows, maintain social distancing. So the message has changed. It's not just open shut. It's a business, a store, a shop communicating with people using language about something that is actually very, very important. So it's the COVID thing between 20 and 2022 that is colouring our lives. And I think it's important in teaching to think about what's the same and what's different. What can we do now that we couldn't do in the past? And what do we hope to be able to do in the future? But maybe also include some of the things that we're doing now. So if I can ask you to just think back a little bit, COVID-19, how did you first hear about COVID-19? I might have asked when you heard about it. I think I've probably first heard about it in January last year. And how did it change your daily life? Now there are as many answers as there are people, and if this was a live workshop, it would be very interesting to get the various comments on that. But worth thinking about. How did it change your daily life? The most obvious thing for me was I couldn't leave the house. I couldn't go and see friends. If I went shopping, went to a store, I had to wear a mask, still do. I couldn't travel anywhere, couldn't come to Brazil. I couldn't go to Italy, where I go very often. So a lot of changes in daily life on a macro scale and a micro scale.
Sorry, Susan.
Hello?
Sorry? Susan, the slides aren't changing. Can you move the slides forward, please?
Well, I am.
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
Why aren't they changing? I don't
Yes.
understand, Raphael. Because
Oh,
on my screen, they're changing.
no. In the
Oh,
screen, no.
I'm sorry, I don't know what to do.
Try forward the slides in your screen.
It's crazy. I mean, okay, I'm going back to the beginning.
I can advance it for you.
Can
It
you?
seems okay for you?
I mean, on my screen, they're changing. Raphael, I don't know what to do because
Susan?
yeah.
I can use it. I can use mine, okay?
Yeah, okay. Okay. Good.
No, it's okay.
Okay. We'll begin again. Well, what I said was we're talking about past, present, and future. Raphael, I can't make them move. So can you? You'll have to change them. Okay, and we want to focus on people, place, and language. Next one. I don't know what to do, Raphael. I'm sorry. I can't see how we can continue. I mean, there are 70 slides.
Susan?
Yeah.
The talk is amazing. No slides, okay? It's perfect. Your voice, your presentation, okay?
Yeah, but if I can't.
It's not necessary slides.
Okay, well, I'll just talk then.
Thank you, Susan. And sorry again.
See an increasingly desperate Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
No, it's okay. I'm sorry to you all. Shall I go back to where I was? Is that sensible? What was I saying? So what I was talking about was how things have changed. And what I was showing you, in fact, was photos that I'd taken here in stores, whether there were warning signs for people saying socially distance, keep your distance, and so on. And the place I'd got to was, when did you first hear about COVID-19? How did you hear? And how did it change your daily life? And I think what I said was that for myself, it meant I couldn't travel. I should have been in Brazil. I couldn't go shopping. I couldn't go to a store. So this made life pretty difficult, and various other things. And it's worth reflecting just to remember how much time has changed, what things have changed for you. And the question then to ask yourself is, okay, things changed, but I adapted. So what did I actually do to adapt? How did I change both my life and my teaching, or if I'm learning something, my learning? And what did you learn from adapting? What I learned was that some of the things I did in the past in terms of teaching or training or writing books or giving talks, I would like to continue with when it's possible to do it again. But actually other things, do I really want to do them in the same way? And I think it's important to think about your teaching in terms of that. How would you want to go back to the way you used to do things, or are the things you've learned from teaching online, from having to adapt things, from having to adapt your own life to teaching from the kitchen table in many cases, not being able to go and see things, juggling professional life and personal life, are the things that you've learnt from that, which actually might be useful in the future. And I think as teachers, it's important that we go on thinking, developing. You know, what we did 5 years ago may have worked very well then, but it may not be exactly right for now. And it's important to think about your normal work, how this has changed. What aspects of it might you want to keep in the future? For example, if you're teaching online, would you want to go on teaching online in the future? Would your students, would your learners want to go on learning online, or would they prefer to go back to a live classroom? Or maybe, should one be taking the good things about online learning and teaching, and even when one can go back to a live classroom, should we be doing a bit of both? And only you know the answer to that. Nobody else does. You know your objectives, you know your teaching context, and you know your learners. They may not all be perfect, but your job, our job as teachers, as trainers, as educationalists, is to provide and help our students to get what they want, as well as what we want them to do, and what the institution, the exam, and so on wants them to do. So I think it's very important when we're teaching, and this isn't just post-COVID, but all the time, it's very important to have clear objectives, personal objectives, professional objectives, and give your students responsibility for having their own objectives. It's very easy for students, I think, to just think, I'm going to learn English. It may be simply because it's on the school curriculum. They have to do it at 9 o'clock on Monday morning, or they might actually want to do it. They might need it for their jobs. If they're young children, their parents might decide that it's good for them to learn English, or get them out of the house, or sitting by the computer 2 or 3 times a week. But it's important, I think, that, you know, learning a language has a meaning. And one of the things I'm more and more thinking about is that thinking about how we communicate in our own language can help with thinking how we can communicate in another language. And if we do that, we're focusing not on the verb tense or the vocabulary or whether we make a mistake or don't make a mistake. We're focusing on communication. And that, it seems to me, is what language is about and what learning a language is about. How can you communicate what you want to say, whether you're saying it or writing it? How can you understand, whether you're reading or listening, to what somebody is doing? And what's the purpose of it all? Because I think one of the dangers sometimes in language classrooms and in course book materials is that they don't have a purpose. You know, the purpose is to get it right, not to make mistakes. But actually, in terms of communication, it is how can you communicate? Now, this is a very good example of this. I thought I could communicate with you because my voice is so strange. I thought I could communicate with you largely through writing on my part. I'd written slides, and reading on your part. That fell down because of technology, or probably because I've done something stupid with my computer, more likely. And therefore, we're going into communication through speaking badly on my part and listening, hopefully understanding, on your part. And this changes a little bit. And in fact, I've already changed the way I'm going through this talk. This changes how the communication happens. So I think wherever you're teaching, whenever you're teaching, think about what you want to communicate and how you can communicate. And I think it's important when we think about our learners to remind ourselves that they are people. You know, as a teacher, it's very easy to say, oh, they're A2, B1, intermediate, adult, primary, what have you. They are that in all those things from a learning point of view. But actually, like us, they're people too. And I think we should all spend much more time as teachers getting students, getting our learners to concentrate and think, what is language about? And one can do that quite effectively, I think, by saying, well, how would you communicate that in your own language, in Portuguese? Would there be a difference if you were speaking to a person you didn't know very well, or a friend, somebody of your own age, somebody older than you, younger than you, in a context? It might be in the street, it might be in a formal context. How about if the acoustics were bad? If you couldn't quite hear what the person was saying, would you keep saying, pardon, what? What did you say? Can you repeat that? Etc., etc., etc. And if you can think and ask your students to think about how we communicate and what the problems are in our own language, then it can help bring the foreign language, the second language, the other language to life. Focus on how you feel when you're communicating in any language. What happens when you're tired? What happens when you're nervous? What happens if you go for a job interview? You know, does your voice do all the things that you want it to do? And of course, it's not just voice, because we communicate through our bodies, our hands, facial expression, and so on. Now, one of the things I've noticed a lot over the last year is that because meetings, and I do an awful lot of Zoom meetings, because meetings are held online, not in a room with everybody together, one focuses far more on people's faces and facial expression. And in some ways, it's easier to kind of read into their minds. But in other ways, it's more difficult because you can't see the full language. And some people are constricted by as I have been today, by the technical problems, any technical problems that arise. and are perhaps not very good at communicating, whereas other people feel absolutely relaxed and communicative and so on. So again, the context in which we're working is I think, very, very important. And this is something that I've used and I've encouraged people to use a lot in when using textbook, coursebook dialogues. One of the things that always annoys me in a textbook, in published material, is when a conversation, and I call them conversations, not dialogues, a conversation is presented only in terms of the verb tense, the vocabulary it's trying to reinforce. And you have person A, person B, and they might have a name, you know, John and Mary or what have you. And the person writing the dialogue, or probably the editor, has focused on that, focused on the language, maybe the situation in the sense that it's in a restaurant or it's in the street, but not really on how the place affects the way the communication happens. I used an example when I wrote, of course, some of you may know Encounters, which Macmillan published several years ago. When I was preparing that, it was lucky because I was coming to Brazil a lot to do various other things. And I spent a lot of time just sitting in hotel bars and restaurants and taxis and so on, observing how people were communicating in any language. And what was very interesting from that was the body language. What was also interesting was how, when there was confusion, because what I noticed was, even if it, let's say at a hotel reception place, visitors communicating with the receptionist, very often it wasn't the language that got in the way where communication broke down. It was if the visitors were tired, if they were bad-tempered. Now, I think I'm quite a good, well, I am a good traveller because I like travelling. But even I have been known to be not at my nicest sometimes when I'm travelling. And it was the human dimension, not the language, that stopped the communication. Now, this is quite an interesting thing to do if your textbook dialogue introduces non-communication. You know, you don't understand the number of the hotel room, or whether it's smoking, or what the menu says in the restaurant. If you can encourage students to think, well, you know, what about you in that situation? Imagine that you don't like the person that you're talking to. How would this affect how you speak to them in Portuguese, in any language? How can you bring that in to making the dialogue, the conversation in the textbook come alive? And I think the more and more that we could do that, bringing real life and classroom life together, it is very helpful. I was at a talk, because I really had no voice on Saturday, I sadly had to cancel the Bras-Tisol talk I was meant to be doing on projects. But the day before, I'd been to a talk which some of you may have been to, given by John Corbett, who I know very well, who lives partly in Brazil and is now working in China. And he was talking about the names of shops. He and Augusta, his wife, live, when they're not in China, outside Sao Paulo. I can't remember exactly where, but a small place, a bit like the place I live in here in Scotland. And John showed some photos of the names of shops. And they were photos he'd taken, and the names, or the shop signs, were very often a mixture of Portuguese and English. And this was a sort of mini project, which is one of the things I wanted to talk about today, the use of projects, mini projects, getting students in your own context to look at the signs and ask, why would you put something in a foreign language? Now, it might be that you live in a place where there are a lot of foreign tourists, and this might attract the foreign tourists. But what John said was that the place where he and Augusta live, it's not a tourist place. So is the use of English as part of the name a sign? Is it something to make the inhabitants think that that place is a bit exotic, a bit special, a bit different from the local cake shop or ice cream shop or whatever it may be, clothes shop? And this use of the environment, whether online or students taking their own photographs on their own phones, or just simply going out and having a look, this is something that one can bring into the classroom, both from a language point of view. Now, there's a lovely photo I have, which I wanted to show you. If we can get this going another time, I will show you. It's a photo I took in Belo Horizonte about 10 years ago. I was in a shopping mall, and there's a store. I don't want to give you the answer. There's a store with a sign above it which says I, and then a word, SCREAM, like SCREAM. If you can picture that, I scream. And obviously, it's a store selling ice cream. And it's a very clever use of language. But then you ask yourself, or you can ask yourself, why in Belo Horizonte? Why would you have a sign in English, which is fun? It's playing around with language. Is it for the people who live there? Is it for foreigners like me? Would most people actually be able to relate the name of the store in English to what is being sold, what hopefully they're going to buy? And you can do a lot of work, as I say, online or in reality, getting your students to look at the way language is used in your local context. And it may not be just English. One of the signs that John showed, I think it was a cafe, and its name was in French. You know, now, is that chic? Does that sort of suggest to you that this is a rather special place? Something else, you know, how do we play around with language? Which, of course, is something that is done in advertising a lot, in getting messages over to people. So one of the things I again was going to show you was suggest ways of, between lessons, giving your students something to do, to research, to take a photo of, to find out about, to think about, and bring back to the next lesson. Because that's a way, I think, of linking what they're doing with you in the lesson. Now, whether that's live with the course book, with things on the whiteboard and so on, or whether it's done totally in a digital context, it's a way of getting them to think for themselves. And I think this is very important in language learning, because actually, when we use language, and especially when we use a foreign language, we have to rely on ourselves. And I don't know if you can remember the very first time that you used English in a real context. I won't say necessarily in a foreign place, you know, in Britain or the United States or somewhere, but in a real context where actually it was important that you understood, and it was important that you were understood, because what was important was the communication. And if you can get students to think about language in different contexts, I think that will help them when they come to use, in this case, English themselves. So for an example might be at the end of a lesson, if the language fitted into what you've been doing, you might say to them, before the next lesson, go to the tourist office in this place, or go to their website online. So it can be live or online, you know, remembering that we do as much online now as we do live. And find out what information there is there for foreign visitors. Now, as I say, I live in a small town in Scotland, and it's a tourist area. It's equidistant from Glasgow and Edinburgh, and it's where the countryside begins to get interesting with small mountains and lochs and rivers and so on. So it gets a lot of tourists. And I work part-time as a volunteer in the local visitor information centre. And it's quite interesting. A little game I play with myself when people come in into the place is, I wonder what they're going to ask. Are they here, you know, do they want real information or just want to talk to somebody? And of course, this year, there are no foreign visitors because people can't travel. In the past, there have been a lot from, mostly from European countries. Tourism and business visitors are an important part of a lot of cultures and places, and they're an important context for foreign languages, English, being used. So what information is available for tourists and foreign visitors? What languages is it available in? Probably it'll be in English. How about Japanese? How about French? How about, increasingly here, Chinese? What languages are appropriate? And then getting the students to think for themselves, is the information actually accurate? Is that the sort of information you would give to somebody visiting your place? Could you do it better? How about bringing your ideas to the next class? And this way of using observation and thinking and discussion, for me, is a way of involving students very much in what they're learning and doing, and getting them to relate it to their own interests and needs, objectives. I've been doing quite a lot of work over the last couple of years in a project that involved a lot of project work, thinking about project work. Now, in the past, projects always seem to me to be, well, actually, I've written quite a lot of projects in materials. Sometimes they always seemed a bit artificial. But it seems to me, with the possibility of doing things online, with the possibility of using your own phone to take photos or record little videos and so on, there's a way of getting students involved, either to research something as simple as go to the local tourist office or the website and find out what's there, or finding out maybe a bit more than that, relating that to something that they would do themselves. But maybe you might want to expand it into a much bigger project, which gets the students working together collaboratively. And from an educational point of view, this seems to me to be an important possibility, that students work together, they rely on each other. Quite unexpected people can have strengths or know things that others were unaware of. So in the sense of building cohesion in the class, getting people used to negotiating, relating to each other, working with each other, this can be useful, discovering unknown skills. And if you want to expand a project into something bigger, then it can also involve presenting what you discovered to other people. Now, I mentioned in terms of the tourist office, come to the next lesson and tell us what you found, what you discovered. But a project might be bigger than that. And you might ask a group of students, you might divide the class into groups. You might give them all the opportunity to present what their project is. And they might do this online, or they might do it for real. They might do it through exhibition of photos, lots and lots of different ways. The medium is up to you and them and the time you've got. But doing a project of that kind, and again, in a school context, I think this is very valuable. You're building up not only research skills, sounds very grand, but, finding out about things, analysing what's relevant to this project, and also how we're going to present it. Who's going to do what? How long is it going to take? Are people going to understand? Is my computer going to work when I do it? Etc., etc., etc. And again, from an educational point of view, one of the huge benefits of presenting a project to others is that they then have to learn how to take the feedback. Are the rest of the class going to say, "Oh, that was wonderful, it was so exciting, I learned so many things, I really admire what you did"? Or are they going to sit there like this? Don't like it. And the ability to analyze, the ability to take criticism is something, it's a kind of life skill. It's not linked to English, it's not linked to language, it's linked to us and people in the context in which we're living and working. And I think if you can build up the ability to analyze how language is used, why we're using it in that way, if you can do it better through adding videos, photos, and so on, that's a useful life skill for your students to have. So I think one of the things that maybe this pandemic has reminded us is that there are a lot of different ways of involving and teaching language in a real context. And perhaps one of the ways into that is thinking how people use it in real life. One of the things I've noticed over the past year, because people, I think, feel frustrated through not being able to do the things they've been used to doing, is that a lot of people feel a bit trapped. And I've noticed on Facebook, on social media, at least here in Scotland, I don't know about in Brazil, but my guess is it might be the same. People have got much more aggressive. The kind of posting on Facebook and other social media here, in some cases, is quite horrible. This is a small town, 3,500 people, very beautiful scenery. And some people, to be frank, are quite horrible with each other. Well, maybe they're horrible anyway, but it's much more noticeable because I think people feel this sort of feeling of being trapped and not being able to do what they want to do. And this brings me back to my suggestion with using textbook dialogues, conversations, is, inject a bit of feeling into it. One I very often use when I'm talking about it is a conversation which is based on a real one, which I noticed was in a hotel restaurant, or the sort of bar area of a hotel where I was staying in Sao Paulo. And I noticed two British, they were British, I think they were British, but they were certainly native English speakers, a man and a woman. And the restaurant was incredibly busy. I can't remember if it was a weekend or a holiday or something. And the woman especially was very aggressive, and she was cross because there wasn't a menu on on the table. And the waiter came, and he had very minimal English. He gave them the menu, and she immediately snapped at him, "Is this all there is?" or something like that. And I thought, my gosh, how rude. And the poor man, who, you know, was obviously very tired and quite nervous, he apologized. And then they said, oh, they just have some wine. And I think the man said, we'll have 2 glasses of red, or red or white or something. And the waiter said, we don't have glasses, we only have bottles. And the woman again was incredibly rude, and she said, oh, that's ridiculous. And then she looked at the man, she said, I don't like this place, let's go, and went off. And there was actually a bit more to the conversation than that. Well, I'd noticed it. I hadn't been recording it, and I hadn't taken notes, but I wrote notes very quickly on memory. And it's a dialogue I've used quite a lot. Looks a very standard textbook dialogue. What would you like? I'd like, blah, blah, blah. If you say to students, imagine you're in a bad temper, or you're the waiter, you don't like these people, but you have to be polite. Well, you should be polite. Or maybe these 2 people have just had a quarrel and they don't like each other and they're in a bad mood. If you can inject things like that, which are based on our own personal life, on real life, into textbook material, whether you're using it online or in the book, then I think it brings it to life. And I think that, and I'm conscious of time, I think one of the things that this strange period we've been going through has taught me, certainly, is to look at things in different ways, to look at the language in the textbook and say, how does that reflect my reality, my students' reality, Brazilian reality, big city reality, small city, small town reality? How can making that link, or asking students to relate the kind of language that's used here, that's presented here, with how it would be in Portuguese, maybe within their family context or among their friends? What's the same? What's different? If you can do that, and in many ways, doing it online is maybe more controllable than doing it live. If you can do that, you're empowering the students to make their own decisions about language, to use their own resources. As I said near the beginning, I think at the bit when I was trying to use the slides and couldn't, there is a danger as a teacher that you think of students as beginner, intermediate, elementary, A1, B2, whatever it may be. But they are actually individuals. And the more you can encourage them to use their own personal lives, their analytical skills, their thinking skills about how they react in their own environments, and then relate that to the language in the textbook, I think it's a way of bringing language and culture together, which I think in where we are now, we should be trying to do, and making them aware of how language is not just the words, it's how we use the words, how we use facial expression, gesture. I mean, one of the things that infuriates me here in Scotland, it's because I've lived in Italy and France quite a lot, and I travel a huge amount. It's automatic for me, if I'm passing somebody in the street, who I may know or don't know, to say buongiorno, come stai, buongiorno, oh, bonjour. Here, British people give you a very funny look if you greet them, I don't know if they think you're trying to make friends with them or something or accost them, but I find it extraordinary. So here am I, a native English speaker in an English, well, Scottish English speaking place, finding that my behavior is actually not what is expected by other people. And when I go to Italy or France, I feel much more comfortable because everybody I pass, I say bonjour to or buonasera, or whatever it may be. The thing that I always have to remind myself about when I come to Brazil, when I go to a conference, an exhibition, is how you all kiss each other, not just on the first day, which is probably what it would be in France or Italy, but every day. And it's very nice. But again, I have to think, oh my God, behavior, Susan, because it's so rude if you don't. So all these things, whether it's culture, whether it's behavior, I don't know. But for me, it's part of language. So really what this pause, this year, this 15 months has done for me is given me time to think. Hopefully it's given you time to think also. And it's also given me the opportunity to ask a lot of questions of myself. Now, some of you may know me because of this book, which I wrote with Vinnie Nobre about 2 years ago, Teaching English Today. And when we wrote that, we decided alongside the text to have questions to encourage anybody using the book for training to not just say Vinnie and Susan say, but what do I think? What's relevant in my context? And I think this encouraging of questioning, both in pure language learning, but above all in teacher training, above all for training, to encourage people to ask questions rather than accept what they're told, is, I think, very important. And in fact, increasingly, if we did Vinnie doesn't know this, but if we did a new edition of the book, it would have more questions and less answers, I suspect. I think I'm going to finish there. I really must apologize. Well, first of all, for this weird voice that comes and goes, but above all for the mess I made at the beginning with the slides. Raphael does have the slides, so if anybody wanted them, I'm more than happy for you to have them. And I'm also very happy for my email to be posted, sent to you all. And if anybody wanted to comment or question, I would respond. I can't go anywhere, so I'm actually quite good at answering emails anyway. So thank you very, very much. Again, apologies for the technical things, which I'm sure are my fault, and enjoy the rest of these days. Thank you very much. Raphael, thank you.
Thank you, Susan. You are amazing. Thank you again. And I'm sorry for the slides presentation. Oh my God. Sorry again, Susan.
We managed. You're all very patient.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
I'm sorry for the... Bye-bye, Susan. Thank you. Oh my God. Sorry again, Susan.